Okay, here we are.
Once
All right.
again. Once again, John.
Once again, second time.
Yes,
Okay?
what a distinct pleasure it is, sir.
Yeah, it's going to be more of a pleasure for me because now you're asking me questions rather than me asking you questions.
The tables have turned.
The tables have turned. You made this promise. He made this promise a year ago when I was in New Hampshire, and we discussed his wonderful book. So now, he made the promise that he's going to... That's right. Although, yeah, I'm going to put it up on the screen because they're going to see it reversed. The title. See, if you do this, right?
Are you judging me, John?
I'm judging you.
How dare you?
I'm judging you because you lack the knowledge. You lack the knowledge of how videos work.
Let's start and let's think about how this is going to frame the video.
Okay.
I'm very hurt. I feel
Started
offended.
badly.
Look, but you know what? I won't hold it against you because a book of this caliber is one that deserves a serious discussion. So, this lack of tact, if you will, for the interviewer on your end, I'll forgive it, John. I'll forgive it.
The quality of my literature makes my sins more forgivable. All right, man. Shoot with the question.
Well, John, there's so much to say. I mean, I guess first off, I really appreciated when you previously interviewed me about Before Evil. I appreciated the intensity of your questions. Now, for our viewers, I'll go ahead and highlight a commonality I immediately feel with John. There's a certain intensity to your essence that I relate to. And I wonder if anyone's ever said this to you, particularly abroad in Spain, which is where we're going, obviously. Have you ever been yelled at for speaking too loudly and too intensively?
Yeah. I'm told regularly. I have maybe my followers on Book Rants don't know, but a lot of them do. I have 310,000 followers on Instagram who follow me for my lessons on Spanish and English. And they're constantly saying that in my videos that I'm too intense. They're constantly telling me in my videos that I should smile more. Okay? I think I put people off with my intensity. Not only do I speak too loud, but I think I make people uncomfortable. I think maybe you and I share the quality of people are more comfortable listening to us when they're in a crowd. A group of people listening to us are far more comfortable with me than a one-on-one. If I'm sitting down one-on-one talking to a person like I'm talking to you right now, they kind of shrink away. But if I'm on a stage speaking to people, the energy that I kind of project it projects, I think, more comfortably to the receiver of the message if it's in a crowd.
I like it as the beating heart of life pervading the conversation. Yes. I think the profound nature of what existence is, the meaning of being born, living, and dying, is playing out in the midst of conversation, and that means it has to be loud. It should matter.
Well,
it should be intensely spoken. So that is what I fundamentally relate to. My Half Orange, a story of love and language in Seville. I guess I just want to start by initially saying I think this is an extremely well-written book.
Thank you.
There's so much I want to say about it, but just the ability to have the fluid nature to the writing that you've produced here, I couldn't put it down in the sense that I wanted to keep going. And that's the cliche, right? But it's different whenever you're connecting to a very specific theme, right? And the specific theme here is not only the story of the love of your life, your half orange, it is the story of immersing yourself in a different universe. So it's taking the intensity that is John Julius Reel, and we're now going to put you outside of your native ecosystem. We're going to move from Staten Island. We're going to take you out of the setting that you have been bred and born in, the context which defines your life. That context, readers, is the notion that Bill Reel, your father, is an extraordinarily famous columnist, an extraordinary writer. Right? So we're going to take John Julius Reel, we're going to move him out of his natural ecosystem and see how he thrives in one that's a different universe, in Seville. So this book is not only the opportunity for you, if you will, to flex. I mean, the fact that you're an extraordinary writer in your own right.
Well, thank you.
But a very specific theme. So let's just be clear here when I'm saying can't put it down. Like, what are we talking about? Can't put down a story that is about immersing oneself in a radically different culture, radically so to speak, if you will, and falling in love. And also coming to terms with the meaning of what a large part of this is about, the idiosyncrasies of language. Okay, so there's so much to say. I have a long list of questions. John, would you like to respond?
Yeah,
before we
I
continue?
do, because I think, the way, what your job as a teacher of global history, you understand what it is, or you understand sort of the multifaceted nature of culture, right? A culture can be where you were born and raised, a culture can be a family, a culture can be friends, a culture can be a language, a culture can be a relationship. So in other words, the culture of my relationships before I got to Seville were all single, there's sort of young bachelor, not really looking or wanting to start a family. That was the culture of my interactions with women. So that because I arrived in Spain when I was 35, so basically I would say for 15 years I had interacted with women without the idea of any sort of commitment, a possibility of commitment. And that's a culture. It's a culture. Like, that is a way of living your life. There are certain accoutrements to a conversation with someone if that is not a possibility, okay? And when I went to Seville, Spain, I thought it was going to be the beginning in my journey where I would go from country to country. After I learned Spanish, I would have half the world to sort of like flit around to, have different girlfriends, and have different experiences. But ultimately, as I look back now, they would have been superficial experiences. And so as I'm kind of falling in love with a city, a language, a country, or a part of a country, I'm also falling in love with a different type of relationship, a different type of culture. So in other words, all of these things, all of these cultural situations that were previously comfort zones, New York, the ability to speak with intensity and precision, I suddenly was unable to do that. I was suddenly in an area where like, there's a moment in the book where my wife asks me, or I asked her, I try to put her in an uncomfortable situation. I say, well, like, do you want to have kids one day? Hoping that she would sort of like shrink from that question and give some sort of like half-assed answer to make me think that I can continue, having a superficial relationship with her. And she says to me, of course I want children, but first I have to find a man who's worthy of them. And so in that particular moment, just the fact of like, no bullshit, like, I'm throwing this out there, I don't care what you fucking think, if what I'm looking for is a commitment, I don't care if that scares you away. Suddenly just the straightforward honesty of this woman, I suddenly knew, like, this is the type of culture, the culture of direct honesty that I want to live in. And there's a lot of that in Seville too. Just like the way that she ate without inhibitions in front of me. There was no, I'm just gonna have a salad. It was just, give me more meat, give me more beer. I just feel as though there is a kind of, my wife is not university educated. She's not somebody who cares about that. She's somebody who is sort of intelligent and sophisticated for the culture she was raised in, the different times and the extremes she lived in. I mean, the amazing thing about my wife is that, when she was born, she's born the same year I was, 1967. And so, about history, that the dictatorship in Spain ended with Franco in 1975. So basically, she is, at that time, not 8 years old. I remember that happening. I remember being in New York City and remembering that I didn't know what it meant, but I remember that there was this dictatorship in the Western world had ended because Franco had died. And she went from this very, very closed situation. She was in a convent school where a good proportion of those people were orphans. Now, orphans means that the nuns had probably taken these kids away from family, from the liberal side. And so she's living in this, saying the rosary every day, with these wonderful memories of nuns. There was no sense of being oppressed by the Catholic Church. My wife has no sense of that. To her, it's beauty. And then, at the same time, she lives what's called the transition. So this is when basically Madrid, and slowly it moved out to the provinces, the way that Spain opened up to democracy and kind of films where women are nude half the time, and just all of the Catholic repression has just opened up the extremes. She's living this stuff, and she had this extreme change in culture from one very, very closed in the Catholic Church where, which she loved, to then going to alternative spirituality camps where people are giving lessons on alternative massage naked in front of the class, and she's comfortable in both those worlds. And so there is a kind of ability to move between cultures, which I, as a kind of repressed Catholic New Yorker, am unable to move in. I grew up in the 80s where, Ronald Reagan was president, and, my school was very, very Catholic, and my father was my father, in addition to being, like, for example, when he would write a good column, Frank Sinatra would call him to to congratulate him. I met Muhammad Ali in I think 1976 after he'd lost to Leon Spinks the first time and he was about to win the heavyweight championship for the third time. I sat down with him in his camp in Deer Park, Pennsylvania, and watched the fight tape with him and his sparring partners. And he got up and started talking to me. I spent the entire afternoon with him because Angelo Dundee, Muhammad Ali's trainer, was my father's fan, was a fan of my father. And when my father retired, George Bush Jr. wrote him a letter of congratulations. So in other words, this is the kind of thing where I basically had to flee from the kind of... My father was also a stylist. I mean, you asked about the book being well written. I mean, I don't know, I can't speak to it being well written, but I can speak to the fact that I am a kind of stylist in the sense that I want every sentence to sound a specific way. I want a sentence to have a sonorance or to be sonorous, and I want it to ring in a certain way, and it takes me a long, long time to get the sentences right. I'm a slow writer. This book took me 10 years to write. And so my father was also a stylist, and I wanted to get away from him, but I also wanted the book to be a kind of homage to him, in the sense that my father could create a work of art out of 1,500 words when he wrote about his family, when he wrote about his daughters. And I saw my father do that. I saw my father do it. I saw people moved by my father's work, not necessarily when he was being a pundit or when he was commentating on politics, but when he was commentating on families, I think he was an artist. And I wanted the book to be a homage to him in that each piece I wanted to be an entity in itself. And at the same time, I wanted to order those pieces in a way that the overall effect, they fed off each other, and the book led to a kind of culmination.
Before we get deeper into the discussion of your father, I think what I most appreciate about that response is it becomes across very clearly, I hope, to viewers, this book in so many ways is a work of tribute to your wife, to your half orange.
Oh, yes, well, it is, yes.
And so the question I want to ask on that is, and by the way, before I ask the question, it makes me think about Geoffrey Chaucer's point that, what is better than wisdom? A woman. What is better than a good woman? Nothing. Tell me what, and you mentioned about the notion of your wife, maybe not traditional education, the university system, but the book is full of intellectual banter between you and your wife. And I don't mean intellectual banter about something like Chaucer. I mean intellectual banter about like the meaning of daily existence.
Yeah, she's tremendously
about the meaning of marriage.
Yeah.
And so I was particularly, I think, energized as I read about a healthy relationship rooted in vigorous debate, but also a deep respect for one another. So I guess what I would ask you right now, before we move deeper into a lot of the questions I have, is what is the nature of the relationship with your half orange? First off, could you tell the viewers, what do we mean when I'm referring to your wife as your half orange? Tell that story. But also, what is the foundation, and one of the foundations of this book is your relationship with your wife, right?
I think
what is the meaning of that?
Yeah.
And I mean, the book is My Half Orange.
Yeah.
So, I mean, tell me about this love letter to your wife. And that's not all it is, but that is the focal point of your writing in this.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's a great question. I mean, first of all, My Half Orange is a literal translation of the word mi media naranja, which basically means my soulmate in Spanish. And I thought it had great sound because also civilian oranges and so on and so forth, and the whole citric. In the book, my kids are called Wedge 1 and Wedge 2.
The wedges.
The wedges, yeah. Because they were born of us. I mean, this is the thing, like, what is a relationship? I mean, with someone that works. I mean, look, every relationship that is worth its salt is based, I think, in a deep respect. I mean, we have a relationship, and perhaps that respect first came from my reading of your book, Before Evil, and also the way you reached out to me with a tremendous respect and just asking if I were going to read it. And a lot of people reach out to me, although Book Rants doesn't have many fans, although it's growing. People reach out to me, and the majority of times I just can sense from the way they've reached out to me that it's not a book I'd like. And every time I've sensed from the way a person has reached out to me that their book has been good, I've always been right. I don't know, maybe the ones who reached out to me who put me off, maybe their books were good too, but I certainly know that the people who've reached out to me, and Before Evil is a wonderful accomplishment too, but I think it's about respect. And I think what my wife and I, what carries us through, and what I think is going to be what is passed on to my children, is the absolute respect for her and her thoughts and her ideas. And I think that, you know, unfortunately, my wife, because she is beautiful and because she is sexy and because she doesn't hide her sexiness, very often people have treated her without respect. Bosses, co-workers. As a secretary, she has heard over and over again what you and I would term as sexist remarks, and she's laughed at them. And she's turned it around so it works in her favor many times, and other times she's turned it around. It hasn't been able to work to her favor.
Your wife strikes me as many things. Weak is not one of them.
No, she's not weak.
She strikes me as a person with a backbone of steel.
Well, I mean, she has her moments when she's weak, when she kind of feels, you know, I don't cover this in the book, but she lost her job in a way that was tremendously unfair and made her feel tremendously impotent at the same time that she was losing her mother and had lost her father, and that was probably the lowest moment in her life. But if you can imagine, she reinvented herself as a yoga teacher. Now she's a yoga teacher in Seville, and she's got, you know, 25, 26 students who enter into her yoga studio the same way that I entered into her apartment, and suddenly I felt at peace. So she was able, at 41 years old, 42 years old, to have the guts. I mean, look, at that time also my career had developed enough that I could support her just like she had supported me at the beginning, allowing me to write so that, you know, doing this job that she hated, okay? So in many, many ways she's tough, man, and she's got resolve, and, you know, because she lives the moment, and because this is what I respect her for. I'm intense. It's very, very difficult for me to relax. It's very, very difficult for me to, you know, live a moment if I don't think it's important for me. And someone once told me, well, John, it may not be important for you, but may be important to the people around you, you know? And she basically embodies that idea. She is very, very, the opening chapter of the book, which I was told to write near the end, of how what my wife embodies, this kind of peace that we all kind of sidle up next to and feel the vibe and then return to our projects with more strength. I mean, that's really what she is, and the fact that she provides that for me she changed my life in a way that, you know, Geoffrey Chaucer, I mean, the way you put perfectly with his words, I'd never heard that before.
And what is better? And what is better than a woman, a good woman? Nothing.
Nothing. No. I mean, I think that there's a great line in the book by John Steinbeck where it's not the grapes of wrath, it's East of Eden, where he's talking about the sour stomach of single men. The sour stomach of single men. And I swear to you, I had a sour stomach before I started sleeping in the bed with her every night, and my stomach problems, my indigestion was healed. And I think it was just because of the peace that I was able to achieve with her, like just able to sleep.
The organic nature of the depth of love between you.
Yeah,
and the story of falling in love with somebody and having that produce a beautiful family. I think that was something that I felt it in the pit of my stomach as I read the book, right? I felt the true love that you have for your wife and the deep authenticity of that love. So then here's another question for you.
Yeah.
I don't think what we're getting into yet is my Spanish skills are so lacking. And by that I mean I have none. None. Zero. I was actually had a buddy, I think there was a skit on this. I'll go ahead and be self-deprecating, though it is not an invitation to mockery, just so we're clear.
No.
All right, I had a buddy recently, right? And I'm pretty sure there's a skit on this on Spanish TV at some point, writing, yo, hermano. And I had the audacity to, you know what I'm going with this?
Yeah. No.
Who is this hermano? This is Brandon, I'm sorry. And I want you to think about the depth of humiliation, but I do humility very well, John, and I'm curious about whether you do as well or not. But we'll get to this later on. That's question 42. My question right now, as we move on to question 3 to your viewers, is ultimately, could you in one sentence in Spanish, which I hope that you will be kind enough to translate for everybody, could you describe your wife in one sentence in Spanish? Spanish is such a crucial part of the book, and
Yeah.
you're coming to terms with the language, and we'll get to that, but one sentence in Spanish about your wife.
Feliz y viviendo el momento, happy and living the moment. I mean, this is what she does. I mean, what do we have beyond the present? I'm always thinking about the past, and I'm always thinking about the future. I'm always thinking about where my projects will lead me. I'm always thinking about, I wish this had gone better. I wish this, I wish I'd handled this better. And she has allowed me to let that stuff go. And, these are cliches, feliz y viviendo el momento, happy and living the moment. But, I mean, how do you, it all comes back to the most simple things. It's like Tolstoy saying at the end of his life, it all came down to doing it better, living better. That's all it comes down to. I mean, that is ultimately the goal of life, to do it better, to live it better.
How do we balance the depth of love in your relationship with the quirks of reality of being married to somebody, right? So that was interesting. You were noting how within the book, the peace of mind that arises from being truly engaged in the moment, but then you're like, we got to get to the airport.
Yeah.
We need to leave.
Yeah.
Come on, we need to get out the door. Before we move on, right? How have you balanced the reality of a relationship that is rooted in such profound love and deep respect for one another with the quirks of daily reality of okay, we need to leave now. So what is your larger takeaway about the meaning of relationships in terms of coming to terms with it as inherently imperfect?
Well, yeah, those moments that every relationship has, the ups and downs of them, when we're not communicating. And those moments, how deeply they affect me. Like when my wife and I are not communicating well, I lose my patience with the kids sooner. I have less ganas is the word in English, less desire really to go to work, less desire to write. I've become tremendously dependent on her. In those moments when I'm down and, every relationship, when she feels like she's not being respected enough, when she feels I'm not giving enough time to the kids, when she feels like I'm giving too much time to my projects, these are conflicts that repeatedly come up in our lives. And there's more that she has to forgive than I have to forgive. And again, there's also tied to the respect is just the gratitude that she accepts me for who I am. And, I'm just very, very grateful. I worry very often, like how just being here I had to come to home for 12 days because my mother's not doing very well. And I left my wife and kids home in Seville. Today is my 14-year-old son's birthday. And, I'm constantly anxious and agitated because there's, the house seems empty. I don't feel en mi salsa, in Spanish, in my sauce. My sauce is Seville. That's el puchero, or the meat stew that I feel most comfortable in now, that I feel I get heated by. I get cocinado a mi punto, cooked just right.
These analogies speak to exactly the depth of the book in terms of speaking to a language of a place. And I don't mean speaking Spanish.
Yeah.
I mean the vibe and the feel.
Yeah.
That's what begins to shine through. I'd love to read an excerpt that stuck out to me. And I would like to ask you, and it's essentially, the framing question is, what are home? What are home and love? What is home? What is love? And this was something that really stood out to me, right? In the chapter in which you're weighing the distinctions, the similarities, the differences between New York City and Seville, this is something that resonated with me. Something to measure significance by. What's temporary and what's permanent, what's fleeting and what's eternal. The more we miss each other, the more we feel each other's presence. The more we feel each other's presence, the more we're reminded of who we've been and what we might become. The first time I walked the streets of Seville, pierced by an arrow, marveling at what I saw, I felt as though New York had prepared me for it. I felt oddly at home. Years later, when Seville really was my home, an old man, accompanied by his caretaker, stopped in his tracks, choked up, and called out to my boys, "I love you." Not in English, obviously. His outburst did not seem strange to me. I knew about love at first sight, how deep it can run, trailing clouds of glory from other great loves. The Spanish like to say every child is a world apart. The implication being that we should not compare them. The writer Evelyn Waugh once said, comparisons are odious. Well, I compare my sons for the same reason that I compare cities, language, and cultures, so that they become more distinct and clear, to help me define what love and home are, to help anchor me in place so that nothing can be erased. Because if I ever lost any of this, my world would come apart. What is home? What is love? How do you frame this larger narrative in your book?
Yeah, it goes out in concentric circles, right? It starts with my relationship with my wife, the first time I entered her apartment, how I felt so at home there. And then that home grew. We had 2 kids back to back very quickly. And my home became then Seville, and my home then became Andalusia in general. And I became sort of accepted into the city. I became a columnist in the paper, like my dad.
Except writing in Spanish. Writing in Spanish.
That's the great
language,
irony, no? Like
yeah.
I got the job without his connections,
yeah,
and I became a columnist. But yeah, so and then I felt accepted by the city. It's almost like they gave me a yes, because this is interesting. When my first son was born, the doctors took him away because he had low glucose, and they put him in an incubator, and I didn't understand the doctors. And so I said to myself at that moment, I said, I made a pact with myself. I'm not going to read or write in English for the next 5 years. Now, of course, I wrote emails to my family, but I didn't, every book, because I read for pleasure, and I write for pleasure. And I'm only going to read and write in Spanish for pleasure. And I did that for 5 years. I stuck by it. And when I decided that, well, these scribblings that I'm writing down in Spanish might be good, and I sent them off to the newspaper on a lark, and they accepted them to me to write a sort of a chronicle of sort of a foreigner in Seville. I felt as though the city had accepted me in many, many ways, in a way that New York hadn't. New York was not New York in many, many ways, as far as my writing career went, was filled with rejections. My appeals to get my stories published, my books published, had always been met with rejection. And that's not to blame the city, because I don't think I was a mature writer there. And I think that perhaps my experience in Seville, my experience with learning what love is, my experience with learning what home is, all those things gave me a perspective that allowed me to write a book where I had something to say. And ultimately the book wasn't published in New York, it was published in Chicago by Tortoise Books. But nonetheless, I feel as though also it's a place where, home is a place where you feel accepted. I feel very accepted by my wife. I feel very accepted by the city. I mean, I make a living.
But it's not just feeling accepted by your wife and by the city. It's the depth of connection with the people of Seville, right?
Also,
and so here's what I recall. One of the stories that sticks out to me, and I'm going to paraphrase it because I forget the exact wording. The distinctions between what would happen raising kids in New York City versus raising kids in Seville. There's a lovely scene in the book, right? You're in a restaurant and you have a toddler, and one of the toddlers wanders off, and he ends up joining another table, a huge family. Yeah. And rather than kind of being peeved and being like, "Come get your kid," they included him in their family and in their family.
At the head of the table.
Yeah, at the head of the table. And then I forget the Spanish phrases, but as they were leaving, they were yelling out acclamations of love, "Don't go changing.
Don't change my soul."
Yes,
don't change
I also
my
know
soul.
you going. I think it was your butcher, right? They call you my soul.
Yeah, they call
and you're
me.
like, I'm not really sure how to feel about like my butcher being like my soul.
Yeah, call me campeón, champion.
There's a depth of intimacy.
That's the thing.
I feel pulling me in. And that's, as I've returned back to the framing point of like not wanting to stop reading. But it's not just about the cliche of not wanting to put a book down. It's about the depth of a theme that you feel. And in this case, it's not only the intimacy of you and your wife's relationship, it's the intimacy of Seville.
Sure.
Another point on this that sticks out, one of my favorite parts, right? So the notion of if your dog poops on the sidewalk, for the love of God, clean that up. Right. If anybody watching this has ever stepped and dog mess on the street, the depth of anger in that moment. And so you're in Seville and you're like, I've had enough. I don't understand why people in this city won't clean up after their dogs. Right. I don't have to put up with this. And you're eagle-eyed. You're in the park. You're with your kids.
It's a great
you
scene.
see a guy. You see a guy in the distance.
I'll never forget that.
His dog is pooping, very nonchalantly ignoring his dog pooping, staring down at the ground.
Right in the walking path. Right in the walking path.
Right in. And you're like, this is it. This is where I tell this guy what's up. He's gonna come over and I'm gonna lay into him.
He's watching me stare at him. Okay, what is this giddy saying to me? I'm gonna go to him and tell him, and I'm like, I got a plan.
This is wrong. People walk in the park. My kids could step in it. And he approaches. You're ready to unload, and then he proffers up a baby bird.
It says, take care of
your children I like to see this baby bird. And the moment is immediately, the anger is totally lost or diminished. That's Seville.
That's Seville, because it's like I said, it's like a dove of peace shitting on your head. That's what I said in the book. It's like, that's what Seville is. It's like, and I think that section ends with, a line, I'm going to end up paraphrasing myself, but something about how, their faults are like, they're nothing compared to their what makes them, what's the opposite of fault, Brandon?
I remember the passage. The passage. Basically, if you can be loved in spite of your faults, that's one of the nicest things you could say about someone.
They're the things that make them wonderful far outweigh their faults. I just can't remember the specific word. This is the thing about it, man. I noticed that everything we do, we sacrifice something. When I have lost a good portion of my English since I've gone over to Spain. I was thinking about this the other day. There's loss and gains and sacrifice in everything we do. I have lost the precision of my English, above all in conversations. The words that I once had at the tip of my tongue are just not there as much as they were anymore, because I've filled my head with another language.
But John, I've managed to do this without learning another language.
What do you mean?
I've managed to lack total precision of my words on a daily basis without the experience of becoming bilingual. It is an amazing thing. Here's what I'm actually saying. Yeah. The depth of your expertise in Spanish is impressive. And let's dig into that just very briefly here. Okay. It's very fascinating to me, the idiosyncrasies of language, right? Like if you were speaking in Korean, you can know every single word, but that's not enough to understand the language. No. You say in your book that for all of the language classes, for all the things trying to be sold to someone to learn a language, it's only enough to really come to terms with the fact that studying a language outside of the given culture is only an introduction.
It is only an introduction.
And that note, what strikes me, so I mentioned Korean, right? You don't say how old are you? That's how many years have you eaten? Literally how many years? So you can know every single word of the dictionary, but unless you understand the cultural idiosyncrasies, right, of the language. And so the example that strikes home to me is you coming to terms with this. You're taking your kids outside, right? Yeah. Someone walks in, not cold at all today. And it is the nature of the language, the quirk of the language, in the sense they're saying it's really cold today. Or you're carrying your kids, carrying your toddler, right? And you're also dealing with kind of the gendered issue of the father carrying around his toddler and people kind of looking at you is the baby safe with you? Can you rear this child? And someone saying that's not safe. And you're like, actually, it is safe. And then
I'm on the defensive all the time.
Listen, this is a German made. This is a German company. This is a great thing. And they're like, They're saying it looks totally safe, guy. Easy. Easy. So tell me about learning a language. What does learning a language mean to you? We've talked about the notion of what is home, what is love, what is the relationship with your wife. But then what is the meaning of language here? Because a good portion of the book is about you, and we're talking about the precision of language. The precision within Spanish is deeply admirable. To be able to write at a high level, living the life of a language is what you've done. What does that mean to you?
Yeah. I mean, I wrote a version of this book first in Spanish in 2014. So, that was, I would say, a draft of what ultimately became My Half Orange. I don't have... Look, this is an interesting idea. Learning to write in a foreign language. Because I don't have the fireworks at my disposal. Because I just haven't mastered the language enough to be a prose stylist. You learn that every sentence has to say something. Because if a sentence is going to have effect, it has to be effective through what it contains, not from how it sounds. And that was a tremendous lesson for me when I became a columnist first in Spanish and then wrote a book in Spanish, is that I had to make sure that every sentence said something. I could no longer show off. And that influenced my writing in a way that, what is the point of language? You're asking, what is the point? Language has to communicate something. It can't just be a facade. It can't just be a dance. I mean, sometimes it is. Sometimes people use a ton of words to say nothing. Sometimes people...
The beauty is the vibe, though, right? Well, the beauty is a vibe and a rhythm, which becomes so much more than just the meaning of words.
Well, that's what I hope...
Is it the dance that makes it great?
It's funny, you talked about and sometimes in English, you bring me to a place and, the food was terrible. I might say to you, great restaurant you picked, Brandon. That type of sarcasm. That always rubs me wrong. But there's a kind of locution, it's called, that's the term, where they put at the front of a phrase, anda que, or vaya que, which basically means walk that, if you're going to translate it purposely. If you say, anda que ha elegido un restaurante bueno, right? Basically, I say, has elegido un restaurante bueno, you have chosen a good restaurant. But anda que is basically the indicator that there's irony, and that's the thing that I didn't catch at first. At first, you don't catch those locuciones. Or, for example, they might say, ¿Dónde ha ido tus ojos? To my son, where have your eyes gone? Because that's an indication that they have big eyes. In other words, I'm sitting in an elevator with a guy, and he's looking at my son's eyes, and he said, ¿Dónde ha ido tus ojos? Where have your eyes gone? And I'm like, what the fuck is he talking about? And I asked my wife, what does that mean? And she goes, it means he's just saying that, he thinks our son's eyes are big. I mean, that idea of like the way that in Spanish it's called gracia. I mean, this is another thing that fascinates me. Words that are almost impossible to translate. Like, you can't really translate gracia. Gracia is like a mix between grace and humor. I've translated it in the book as pizzazz, but that's not really precise. I mean, when a language has words that can't be translated, I mean, sometimes it's food, like gazpacho. I mean, gazpacho is gazpacho. You can't translate gazpacho. You can't say cold tomato soup. You have to say gazpacho. It's a specific type of thing. And so there are words in Spanish that are almost impossible to translate. Or duende is another word where people sort of like, you know this because you have it. You come alive. You become more eloquent as you speak. You become more eloquent. Something enters you, a spirit enters you, and it's not really you speaking. And that's part of what I think is our intensity. It's like there's something had entered into me, a kind of spirit had entered into me that makes my words both more and less me. And I think I know you have this in you. But duende and gazpacho and gracia are words that really cannot be translated. And that's an amazing thing. There's also a chapter, like, for example, about like what language means. The idea, there's a chapter I dedicate in the book about masculine and feminine. And how certain words
It's a fascinating chapter.
Yeah, it is. It's fascinating to me. Like, why, for example, is the word casa feminine and the word hogar masculine? Why were those? Like, what is the organic nature of language such that a word is masculine or feminine? Now, people say, well, it's the ending of the word that makes it masculine or feminine. But why did the ending occur to be a or o?
It's so much more than that because it speaks to the life of a culture, right?
Of an organic thing,
and things that are, I think, absolutely wonderful, and things that are problematic, and everything in between. But let's talk about language a little bit more here for a second. Here's like the pulsing heartbeat of the book in terms of language. It's what words does one, and I think it's a certain certain je ne sais quoi that we can't necessarily articulate precisely, of walking in Seville after a religious festival. In the midst, the mingling smell of horse dung with rosemary.
That's right.
That's been trampled under the feet of horse.
Oh,
What language, what words do we use to describe the moment that you find yourself with that mingling of smells in which you're almost kind of, you're transcending into something different in the moment, intellectually, mentally. And so the book, when it comes to language, is about the jousting between those two things. And same thing with about talking with someone in Seville who's not picked up after their dog, who brings your kid a baby bird.
Yeah.
And you're like, this.
How do you? What's the word? How do you? Those things coexist. And the idea, it helps you, or it stops you from judging people. It stops you from like putting people or dismissing people. It's impossible to dismiss people. I mean, maybe it would happen in any culture. Maybe in any new culture that I threw myself into, the fact that it's new, the eyes of surprise that allow you to sort of see the world and people in a way that makes you accept the mix that they are. I mean,
you live that in the book, and I'm quite enamored of that. And so some specific examples of that would be when you're with your wedges, you're with your boys, you're with your kids, I remember specifically, I believe it was either the bakery or the butchers, where there is a woman outside who's hard up, who's in a bad situation, that some people might say like, oh, no, keep your kids away from this individual. And the woman developed a lovely rapport with your son.
Yeah.
And she would pick up your son. She would hug and kiss on him. And at one point, she disciplined him and it went too far. And
Yeah.
he reacted. But the crux of it.
Yeah.
And when we see this on the street as well, when you interact with people, someone gave your son this big stuffed animal that your wife said,
sure.
get rid of it. Why are you accepting this from strangers? But there's a certain beauty to the way in which you engage with the people of Seville that's so authentic and so non-judgmental. But picking up after your dog aside, that type stuff, right? As the book goes on, you become deeper. There is this unwillingness to judge and a willingness to look to things that might be difficult, but you see beauty in those moments.
Sure.
Where strangers who others might say, don't let that person near your child. You let your child engage, and I felt that. I felt that, and I thought that it speaks to exactly what you're saying, living. The willingness to not judge and to take in everything in your environment.
Yeah. There's a quote yesterday or last week. I was interviewed on this program in Seville, where they asked me. It's a radio program, and they asked me, what is it about this culture that, that we don't see. What is it, because they, you take for granted what you live in every day. And I said, well, one of the things is, I think I quote the line. It's like, I think the line is todo cabe en la viña del Señor. Everything fits in the garden of the Lord. In other words, that the idea, if you go to a cafe in Seville, you will see drunks at 6 o'clock in the morning drinking their anise, with families who have just come from mass, with prostitutes playing the gambling machines, and there'll be people watching the bullfights, and all of these people are coexisting together in the same cafe, and no one's really judging each other. There's a kind of sense of community between people and an acceptance that takes place of, there's no, life is such that, just the idea of luck, which in the United States is something that,
it's a big theme of the book at the end,
It's like we just have to, the idea of circumstance and, look, America is a place where we believe in the self-made man, and it makes people are more ambitious, and maybe they achieve more, and maybe they become other things more. But there is also a lack, I think, of acceptance for, just this is the condition I've been in. This is the condition I've been in. I mean, certain people are born into circumstances in the United States that they just can't fight their way out of. I mean, they just can't. And I think that, and there are people who are born into circumstances like me, which makes it very, very easy to emigrate to Seville. I mean, I don't want to take anything away from what I've done, but I also recognize that I had it very easy going over there. I mean, a white American going over to Seville is going to be given the benefit of the doubt. My education is going to be perceived as better than the education of the natives. Now, that's just a different type of situation. And in 3 years, I can live what other immigrant groups have to take 3 generations to live. So I have all these advantages that I appreciate. But that idea of, luck and admit that that I am lucky, and that is something that I should embrace, and I should not be ashamed of either. I'm not ashamed of my luck. This is something that I'm going to use to my advantage. If I feel ashamed of this luck, I'm not going to be proud of it because I didn't earn it. Okay, but I'm not going to be ashamed of it either. It's like I can't be. If you're intelligent, that's something you're not something you can be proud of. It's something that you've been given. If you're beautiful, that's not something that you can be proud of. It's something you can be given. So in other words, but you can't be ashamed of these things either. I'm not going to be ashamed of it or rich or anything. Like, I'm going to live it to use all of its advantages without shame, without stepping on anyone else, But at the same time, let's have a little bit of compassion. You know what I mean? Let's have a little bit of just facing the reality of, look, there is, I think, from this experience that I've had in Seville, I have been confronted with truth. I have been confronted with, my wife she lives her life honestly. She lives her life honestly. She's not ashamed of anything she's done. Look, let's not go too far. There are things that she's ashamed of that she's done, but she's not ashamed of who she is. And that is a daily lesson for me. That is a daily lesson of me in the sense of, I have to know who I am, and I have to use it to have a more complete experience, to understand life more. I feel like I'm falling into cliches, Brandon.
No. I think there is a deep authenticity that shines through the book and shines through what you're saying now. And I have a couple of last questions that I'm really interested in. I mean, the question for me that I always struggle with when reading a book, particularly a memoir, is so these are obviously profound experiences for you. You've had profound experiences, so profound that you thought, I want to share this. I need to share what has been my experience with a wider audience. But the larger question that always resonates with me is, what is the larger so what? What is the larger who cares? This has been a profound experience for you, but you clearly believe that there is something deeper here, that larger audiences, beyond being entertained, that there's something to be learned here. What is it to be learned? What is the larger takeaway? What is the larger so what? And the final analysis, John Julius Reel, where someone says, who cares? Maybe someone is being not intentionally diminishing in that regard, but someone who is not fully connecting on the way that I'm connecting. They say, John, why should I care?
Yeah.
Seville is a great city. You've met a lovely human being for a life partner. You have a wonderful family. What is the larger so what about why anybody, regardless of their background, should want to read this book and should care?
Well, it's a great question, and I'm going to answer it in a way that I don't think is. It's not up to me to say that. And the great thing about writing a literary book is that I don't have to give an elevator pitch. I don't have to tell you why, or the reader why they should read my book. Maybe there'll be no takeaway for them, okay? All I know is that I have written this book with my soul, and I have expressed myself the absolute best that I can over a 10-year period. I have honed my prose. I have chosen what I think are the most defining experiences in my life that I think made me who I am. Now, the reader can either take that or leave that, but the fact that it's a literary book, it means like I'm not going to, what's the takeaway? Let the reader tell me if they feel as though, like, look, people often talk about like promotion and how do you promote a book? How do you do that? What am I going to do? Go on Twitter and tell people to read my book? Why read my book? No, I have to create. How do I promote myself? I promote myself by championing what I love. I promote myself by reading books with great care and showing my passion for other people's stories, because that's what moves me in life. That's the closest way, that's the easiest way for me to get to the mystery and miracle of the human condition. That's what books have always been for me. And that's why I write them, because I want to give that experience to other people, right? And so I want to create something on the social networks, on YouTube, with my videos on language learning, that make people see, hopefully, that I have a soul and that I have this tremendous desire to make sense of my life. And perhaps in making sense of my life, that might give other people inspiration. I mean, I hope I'm not, thinking that I'm anything special by saying that, but, just the effort that I've made to understand my life and to try to encapsulate what it is that inspires me to live more completely. Maybe if someone reads carefully, and maybe if someone has an open mind, they'll sense that in the book. And that's really what I hope for, is like, who is it, George Eliot, who talked about the chorus invisible? Of all these voices that add to a sort of larger spiritual sense. I mean, I want to be in that chorus invisible. I don't care how many people are listening to my song. I don't care if it gets lost in, the more beautiful sound of geniuses, but I just want to add to that chorus invisible. And if I dedicate my life to writing something that contributes even to the smallest extent of that chorus invisible, I'm not appealing to any particular reader. I don't want to appeal to any particular reader. I want to appeal to that chorus invisible. I want to create a harmony with that chorus invisible. And how do I create a harmony with that chorus invisible? By honing the prose, by choosing the examples, by putting my story in a particular order so that people are moved when they read it. I hope they're moved when they read it. And if they're not, if they stop midway through, hey man, I respect that too. Yeah. I respect that too. You know what? If you're bored with my book, fucking don't finish it. Fucking don't finish it. Put it down and find a book you love. That's what I'm saying. I don't want you to read me if you're bored by me. Do not punish me. Put the book down. Boom.
It is the authenticity of the book and of you, John, that I think people, and I hope, will find infectious. I have a final question, then I have a comment at the end. But my question is, what really I think resonated with me additionally is what it's like to be the son of someone famous, right? And I say that question for last because I imagine, and as I recognize from the book, right, that has been a point of great pride and a point of irritation. What is it like? What was the guy? What a horrible thing to say when someone told you, "Yo, you're Bill Reel's son. You want to write? Forget it." Something along those lines. What a horrible thing to say to somebody.
He was a soccer coach.
Yeah.
Imagine that. Imagine how he treated his athletes. He treated me that way.
My question for you is, what would your dad say about this book? Now, obviously, you can't speak for your father. You don't know exactly what your father would say, but you knew your father better than almost everybody, maybe minus your mother. What would your father say about this accomplishment?
Well, he would encourage me, and I know that he would, he was a funny writer too. I think he would, I put a section of his writing in the book.
Can God do handstands?
And I was like, and my biggest fear, and this is true, this is to be honest, is like, I'm afraid that's the best part of the book, my dad's writing. I'm afraid that section, like there's a part of me like, Jesus, the section that I put about my dad's book is the best part of the book. And I mean, at the same way, I mean, like there was a part of me, imagine my insecurities of like, ooh, I don't want to, I don't want him to shine above me, even in my book, So that is something that I'm gonna, this is funny. Speaking about, I had such admiration for my father. Such admiration for my father that I would stutter in his presence. And he was never a guy that discouraged me. He was never a guy that put me down. He was never a guy that mocked the way I spoke. But because of his success, because of the way people lit up around him, because of the things that he did. I remember once going with him to a police athletic event in New York, and he spoke with the police commissioner, and it was this rapid fire back and forth between them. He didn't take a single note. The next day he wrote a column on the paper, word for word of what he had written. So I had this admiration for him, and I stuttered in front of him. And then I began to master the English language and to take pride in the English language, and was able to sort of make him laugh and use my, the way I put things, I could make him laugh and impress him. And then I went to Spain, and I began to stutter, just like I used to stutter before my father in front of shopkeepers, so that all of the insecurities that I felt that I had overcome, I had to relive them again abroad. So just like he used to say, the best thing for our humility is humiliation. And there was a sense when I first got to Seville, when I couldn't really, speak, I couldn't really express myself. I felt like a loser. And that sort of like set me back to a place where I then had to prove myself to myself again. And it clean slate in many, many ways, and allowed me to live my life in a way where I didn't have to live in my father's shadow. I'm very, very grateful for my childhood. And, I have another memoir, which I hope gets published, where, again, my father's influence I was a prodigious athlete when I was 8. I was this prodigy of a baseball player at 8 years old, and I never got better. I became a very good basketball player, but I constantly basically fell apart in the clutch. I choked, and I played college football for a while, but again sort of backed out because I was afraid of, to live the moment of truth. And again, to experience failure at such a young age because I couldn't live up to people's expectations, and him sort of leading me through that in a non-judgmental way, although knowing that it made him very, very proud, all of my natural talent in sports. That memoir is called A Great Practice Player, because that's what I was. I was a great practice player, but I couldn't perform in games. I couldn't perform in the moment of truth. And, that is, I envision a kind of series of 3 memoirs. This would be the third. And the first would be A Great Practice Player, and then there would be one in the middle, which is about my years of kind of coming to terms with, well, I would say my trials and tribulations with dating and with bad stories with women, I think that would ultimately I want to leave behind basically as a legacy these 3 memoirs. But I think I'm going to go to the grave with my father smiling over me. And I say smiling over me because that's what he's always doing. But nonetheless, it was never him who made that experience hard. It was other people who made that experience hard. And other people is me, because I put the expectations that I felt I had to, or the bar I set it. He didn't, other people didn't. Very often it was in my imagination where other people put that bar, always where to put that bar. And again, my wife helped me put that bar in the right place, which is, again, I didn't really answer your question, but maybe I did indirectly.
I'm interested on the other side of this, right? So you have this relationship with your father that you describe, and kind of working through the reality of who your father was. And then the other side of this is you taking care of your father-in-law, Luis, as he is aging and declining.
Yes.
And I found a great beauty in that. You talked about these profound silences as you're taking care of your ailing father-in-law, the moments that you were silent together, and the deep meaning of that.
Yeah.
There's a richness there that relates to the family, to your family, be that your half oranges or your family.
Well,
here
my
in New
father-in-law was very much like my wife. I didn't get to know him very well, but the ability to sit in silence. Imagine my wife is a yoga teacher, which is about silence. It's about sitting in silence. It's about meditation. That she's found her purpose on earth, and that she embodies the spirit of silence. She embodies, feeling comfortable there. And I want to say this about the book is that I structured the book very often in that I wanted the beginning of the book to be funny. I wanted the kind of the problems with language, overcoming them, and then there's a section where I compare and contrast New York City with Seville, which is more analytical, culturally analytical, and then there's the sections where I'm sort of, the stay-at-home dad, and I'm meeting my wife, and then I structured the book in that to take on kind of emotional depth as it went along, and so the book ends with the section called Fathers, where, I lose my father, and I end up taking care of my father-in-law, and then, finally going to see my father's grave, which my mother chose so well, which sort of puts the capper on the story, and closes the circle in many, many ways, which is why I think not only the book ends well, but I think it ends the trilogy of memoirs well. The first 2 memoirs, which aren't published yet, but I hope get published, knock on wood. Again, literary books that I don't really have any elevator pitch for.
This is your take on Henry Miller's Rosy Crucifixion. This is the trilogy that we see coming from you. I see it in the vein of Miller's Rosy Crucifixion.
Wow.
I really very much like the depth and the effort to come to terms with the uniqueness, but also the pervasive commonality of the human condition. That's what I see in this book, through the sliver of a very specific theme. So I have no doubt that your father is an extraordinary writer, which shines through this book, is shining through you. And I really liked when you speak to your father being proud of you, that you're in Spain, writing different language. So in this way, you have managed to pay homage to your father's career.
Sure.
You've done something totally different.
Yeah.
And there's a certain beauty in that. All right, so here's what I have to say in conclusion.
Good,
John.
man.
There's only one way that we can continue from here, which is the next step is I come to Seville your next book. And then we continue this conversation.
Or your next book.
Yes, that's exactly right. So I'll have to come to Seville because I think I need to see and experience and smell, emphasis on smell, the things you're talking about in this book within Seville. But in all profound conviction on my part, I'll never get over it. I'll never get over it. And it can only be said perhaps in banal or cliche terms or trite terms, so forgive me. I'll never get over what it means to actually be a human being, thinking and seeing and existing in this moment, and the fact that what we do or don't do has consequences, and for that to play out through myriad forms and means, and will resonate with readers. Those with whom it will resonate are those who feel what you're describing here, and that plays out in your relationship with your wife, your relationship with New York City, your relationship with Seville, the relationship with your kids, and your father. And I found it really meaningful, man.
Thank you,
and
man.
So I hope others do too.
Yeah.
This is going to be continued.
Yes. I will say, to finish this up, I brought Brandon, just to go to a theme we talked about before, I brought him a little piece of Seville, which is Turron, which is a sweet, which is translated, if you look it up in the dictionary, as nougat. Okay, but nougat is not Turron. So the word nougat, what he's going to have is Turron. Turron, which is a specific type of nougat. It can't be translated as nougat. So, speaking about how certain words can't be translated, I brought him a piece of Seville so that he is going to have with his family, and I brought him 2 boxes because one friend I couldn't see, so I brought him 2 because this stuff is addictive, man. Turron with almendras. Almendras is almonds. Oh, man.
John,
so, yeah.
Let's cut to it. How did my latte measure up against the lattes of Seville? How does the coffee of Concord, New Hampshire, the depth of I'm going to go ahead and call it the capital of coffee culture,
But you're a culture
globally.
Man. But you're a cultured man. So, you know, his it can't be beaten. I mean, here I am drinking it cold and it's still great. Okay? It's got, I mean, he put maple syrup in it. He put cinnamon in it.
It was acceptable.
And
I'd say it was acceptable. I'll feel better when we pick out the best coffee house in Seville.
Yeah.
And then you bring me the best what they have to offer, and then we can laugh about
man.
my latte.
When you come
but
to
we're
Seville,
just
it's going to be a great time, and
I'd
I
like to
really
know,
enjoy.
I refer to Concord as the coffee capital.
No, your house is the coffee capital.
That's my house.
Concord.
My house. Yeah, there we go.
Your house is the coffee capital of Concord.
The coffee capital. Now this is getting better. We're qualifying. This house is the coffee capital of South Concord and Southeast New Hampshire. But I feel really good about that statement.
But it's not only
that
it's like also, you should see, I mean, we can't show you, but on the other side of this camera, okay, because you've got this amazing garden with all these different, I mean, in addition to creating wonderful literature, he also creates in his house, in his garden, he's creating plants that grow from seed to create fruit that will hang over the picket fence leading to his pool. I want to come back in July when this place is a real paradise. Anyway, I think we can.
Do you like peppers? Do you like spicy things?
Yeah, man,
yeah.
I do.
Well, that'll be next.
Okay,
I'll bring you something special from the garden.
Okay.
And I would just like everyone to know, you don't say Spanish tapas. You don't have to say that. Tapas is Spanish. So just to be clear, you don't say I'm going to eat Italian pasta. This might be the most important takeaway of the book, and I'm totally not being glib when I say that.
Yeah.
The most important takeaway is, don't you dare say Spanish tapas. You don't say I'm going to eat Italian pasta.
No, you don't.
Pasta is Italian.
Pasta. Right.
Okay, there you go. That's
Yeah,
totally sincere in that moment. So if you remember one thing from this discussion, that's one of about 9,436 things I could say that brought me amusement and happiness in the book. I felt like you really felt the point about tapas.
I did. Yeah. No, man. You're gonna experience tapas. You're going to experience tapas really when you come to Seville. I'm going to take you to places not only in Seville but outside of Seville where you're going to get a sense of what tapas is, and you're going to experience what it is, what a Spanish meal is.
Well, I'll say this in closing. What I'm most excited about coming to Seville is not only to drink wonderful coffee and eat wonderful food, it's to have the privilege and honor of meeting your life partner who comes across in this book just like a wonderful human being, and to meet the Wedges and congratulate you on a life that you have lived so well and so many adventures ahead of you.
Yeah,
so,
man.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about your book.
Oh,
with me,
no,
John.
man. This is a huge pleasure. I mean, I have to, tons of thanks to Brandon for, matching my intensity. And or I match his, I should say, to make this an interview that is absolutely going to be entertaining for those who want to watch it. Anyway, man, thanks. Tons of love for watching, and tons of love for Brandon for making this happen.